the session for today on payment processing. And thank you for your attendance. I know this is an area where there's been a lot of questions with the new CMS, and learning a new system is never easy, as well as noting that we've migrated a lot of contracts into the system and some of the technical issues that have come up. Really appreciate and welcome you to join the session today. So the CMS team has been working hard to support users, promote fixes and enhancements regarding payment processes, and a lot of information is changing and dynamic on a weekly basis. So we recognize it's often hard to keep up with everything else that's going on during the busy construction season. So again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join the session today. We really hope that today's session will help answer a lot of the questions that are coming up. Again, I think a lot of them are related to just learning the new system and the interface and the sequence of events. So I think the material that's going to be presented today will be really relevant. We will make the presentation and the recording of the session available after the session, and we hope that it's a good refresher for you going forward. So we're gonna allow some questions throughout, but I would ask that you try to hold on to your questions towards the end of each of the different modules that Ryan will be going through, and we'll try to get through as many as possible, and then also can note them at the end and follow up as necessary. So again, I just wanted to kick things off and say thank you. I know it's a large complicated system and a complicated business process that we have. But I can assure you that the team is working hard. I really want to thank the team for all the work that's being done and all the work that you're doing to as we transition into the new contract management system. So without further ado, we have a lot to go through. I will turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Jamie. I'll just give a quick hello for those folks who might not know me yet. That's very true. We're going to go through specific payment stuff today. So basically only thing that relates to payment. So that's pay statements, contractor quantities. We'll do cover lump sum change orders and OPAs, and then the reconciliation and the payment. I tried to structure the training around what is the same and what is different from WBCMS, just to kind of make it a little easier for those folks who were working in WBCMS before. By and large, it's the same process. We've tried to open things up and make things more flexible. We've done that in a lot of different places in the system, including the MLT stuff, the change management stuff. So the big issue with WBCMS was it was very rigid. It was very, if you make one mistake, oh, we need a service request now and a ticket or whatever it is. So we're trying to instill some flexibility into the process, but with that flexibility comes more opportunity for errors or for entangling different things and overlapping things. So we're going to talk about what the system does and doesn't like as far as behaviors and inputs and bad mistakes we can make or bad habits we can form while trying to do payments that later will mess things up when we're trying to process or pull things into an invoice or whatever it is. So I'll get started because there's a lot of content to go through. I'm not going to rush it at all. We can stay later if we need to, trying to respect people's times as well. It's a 2-hour session, but it's fairly dense as far as what we're fitting into it. And then we have a Q&A at the end because there's always a lot of questions in these training things. And then we put together a quick quiz just for your benefit. You can test your own knowledge. You get the answers right away. So at the end, I'll send out a Google form. Anyone who's interested can fill out a quiz, just 20 questions on what we're going to cover today. And then there's a 5-question survey if you want to give some feedback on the actual training itself so we can improve future sessions for ourselves and yourselves. So I'm just going to get going here, save bandwidth on the camera and save your eyes a little bit as well. So as Jamie said, we'll take questions at the end of each module. You can raise your hand or put a question in the chat, and my team's really good at staying on top of the stuff in the chat. So you can just raise your hand. There's a little hand raised there. I think we're all familiar with Teams at this point. It's going to be recorded. We've already started recording, so just for your awareness, we're going to record this, and then as Jamie said again, it's going to be posted for later, and we'll chapter it and everything too, so you'll be able to scroll along and find the specific locations that you're looking for. You don't just have to read through a whole or sit through a whole 2-hour session. Just here, quick touch on the resources. I think we're all aware of the MTO CMS at ontario.ca. You can see we've removed the Kahua support. It's kind of Kahua gets engaged down the line if we can't solve a problem immediately. So we kind of triage with the MTO team, and then we go to KPMG and we go from there. So one point of contact for that, for all the help, should just be the MTO CMS help desk inbox there. Slide this over here. Again, so our technical publication site where you find all of our SSPs and PHCC forms also has the all the user guides and different information for CMS itself. We post our updates there, so the weekly or bi-weekly now updates, as well as a bunch of other useful information, training material, user guides, all that good stuff. This is kind of a loose format. I generally like to leave 30 minutes for questions. If we go over, we go under, we'll see how many questions there are and all that other good stuff. You guys can also take the quiz away with you if you want. You don't have to sit here and do it. So you can do it at your leisure. Okay, so payment in WBCMS and CMS. I mentioned I was going to structure this based on how WBCMS worked. So I'm first going to highlight some differences between the two systems. So the process and the workflow of the payment process has not changed. Postings are still made by both the contractor and the CA. The CA then runs a reconciliation roll-up, and it's based on dates. The contractor acknowledges those item quantities or chooses not to, and then the contractor generates an invoice, pulling in all the reconciled quantities based on those dates again. The invoice is submitted for review and processing, like we all know. There's slight differences in the nomenclature around these processes. We've tried to bring it back a little bit to paper-based days and the language that is prevalent through our user guides and everything else. Just if everyone can please mute themselves. Sometimes we forget. I'm going to mute. Oh, there we go. So they're not called item postings anymore. The CA postings are now pay statements, which they always were, based on the CADM and the case and everything else. So the CAs now make pay statements in their diaries again. Contractors use contractor quantities, which is something that we just kind of made up. But out of the GCs, this used to be SSP 100S19, but it was rolled into the GC refresh this April, I believe. So the contractors are now, well, they were before by the SSP, but they're now required to submit quantities of work to the CA on a weekly basis. This largely came out of WBCMS and the fact that it's easier to invoice at the end of the month the more often you reconcile throughout the month. So we'll touch on that a little later too, but just highlighting that the weekly basis piece is useful for everybody. The CA makes pay statements, as I mentioned. This is consistent with the CADM and the case as well. So this is back from the old progress and final payments guideline. You can tell it was a photocopied version, which is apparently the only one we have left that I could find. But it states right there that pay statements are required when each design entry, which is in other words a subcode, an item of work is completed, or at the end of each pay statement. And then the last step that's still the same, when the reconciliation is sent to the contractor, the reconciliation is still sent for acknowledgement. The only difference being that each line is now auto-filled. So if a contractor has a 200 item invoice, they don't have to click and acknowledge 200 times. They just have to go through and uncheck anything that they don't want billed. So there's some important rules and logic surrounding this posting, reconciliation, and invoicing process. There are important mechanisms with this payment process that explain those rules. So we're going to go through some of those. Some of them relate to the Construction Act or the general conditions. This is going to take you through those rules, those mechanisms, the process from posting to invoicing. We're going to touch on, like I said, OPAs, capturing them on an invoice, proper invoice management. So maintaining only one in-flight invoice. We'll talk about that a lot as well. And then what happens to terminated pay statements and contractor quantities. So getting into it, contractor quantities, first off. They are inputted via a date range. So where a diary's pay statement is based on a single point in time, the contractor quantities are based on a date range from to range, and those ranges are completely editable by the contractor. So while there's a date of work field to input inside the contractor quantity, that date of work is to reflect the exact date of installation of that specific item and subcode. So the date range will show, hey, this is what I did over the last week. It has 30 items, but each of those items will be broken into date of work dates. So the CA knows, okay, this is the date range, this is the set of quantities, and here's the specific dates they were installed. Hopefully those coincide with my inspector's diary pay statement dates. So if you create a contractor quantity record with a date range September 4th to 8th, but you backdate the specific item dates within that back to September 1st, and you run a reconciliation that matches those September 4th to 8th dates, they will still get pulled in. So you can see here, this is a contractor quantity, and we'll go through this in a demo as well. Here's an item. I've posted the date of work as September 1st. You can see a payment quantity of 9 against that, and you can see that it's already been auto or backfilled by the system because it's been included into reconciliation number 16, and you can see the dates there, September 4th to 7th. So here's the date range starting from to the contractor input. I think I just got muted. The contractor inputs the date ranges, so period start, period end, and then down in this little contractor quantities section, you see the insert there. That's where all the items and subcodes are selected and input into the system. Down here on the bottom, always has references and attachments if you want to attach anything that's helpful to the reconciliation of these items. It's always good. Here's that same reconciliation again. You can see reconciliation number 16 at the top. You can see the date ranges again are September 4th to 7th, and it has pulled in that quantity. You note it's not showing the date of work anymore because it's not specific to a subcode. If there was multiple subcodes, they would all be rolled up here as well. So you can see it's pulling in despite that date of work. So that is to say, basically, you should use the date of work to show and record when you installed that item. But if you're trying to capture or catch up an item that you forgot in a payment from the past, so if we're in September and you forgot to post a quantity for August and you do a date range in September with a specifically backdated item date of work for August, it's not going to pull that in. You would have to adjust the from to dates of your whole contractor quantity back to fall within the dates of that August reconciliation. So obviously the from to dates need to be carefully considered here. You can't backdate a specific item within a CQ. Remember I said that you have to backdate the entire CQ itself. Whoops, went a little too far. If the desire is to backdate only a select item, simply create a standalone contractor quantity. So in the example I just gave, you're trying to do postings for this month, but you forgot one from last month. Just do a single one with one item in it. You don't need more than one item to do a contractor quantity. There's nothing wrong with that. And just backdate the whole date range. So this is what I've kind of drawn up to try and help illustrate where we fall into a lot of issues that we find with users writing into the help desk. The dates are so important to the whole payment process, and not to convolute things, but to kind of illustrate how complicated the dates can get. You have the pay statement dates, which have the dates of diary and the date of work in them. Then you have the contractor quantities, which also have a date of work in them. Both the dates of work are relevant to the reconciliation, but they're still important to business. You have the date range of the contractor quantity itself. Then you have the reconciliation that has a date range that must capture the date ranges of the contractor quantities. Then you have an invoice that also must capture the date ranges of the reconciliations. So you can see everything has to line up in order for it to pull a payment in, because there can't be any ambiguity for the computer system. It must only take one number, and as soon as it's presented with two arguments, it shuts down and doesn't know what to do. So you can see here, this is just something I've drawn up. The purple dates in the top are the date ranges for contractor quantities that were submitted. And then on the bottom, the date range that the CA ran a reconciliation for. So if we blow it up a little bit here, you can see, obviously, the date range of the contractor quantity falls beyond what the date of reconciliation is and doesn't actually go back to the first date of reconciliation. And then conversely, you can see the reconciliation is not going to capture the full scope of the contractor quantity. So we get a lot of people writing in and saying, hey, I've got a contractor quantity here. I've got 89 items. It only pulled in 56. 9 times out of 10, this would be the reason why that is, because the dates aren't lining up. So always be mindful of that. Okay, so this is a closer look at the contractor quantities again. They select the from to dates. They can't overlap, or they can overlap, sorry. They have a picker that pulls up, you pick a date range. So right here is where you're able to backdate the date range. Just know that you have to backdate the range itself and not the specific item within the contractor quantity. The from dates can overlap, but for sake of ease, it's best practice to abut them. So you can overlap them. We'll talk about it later in reconciliation. If you do have to overlap them, it's always best to reconcile that set of contractor quantities before you overlap them with another one, just making things simpler for the system again and not presenting too many arguments to it. There's no limits on the date range either. So having multiple overlapping and open contractor quantities is allowable, but it's not recommended. So just another note on things that cause issues sometimes. So the overlapping CQs and then the reconciliation is trying to capture those CQs. So looking here again, just to illustrate this, we have contractor quantities with 3 date ranges now, 1, 2, 3, and then we have reconciliation. So note with multiple contractor quantities overlapping, these are all unreconciled. So if we were to layer one reconciliation over here, the system's going to struggle with which items to pull in, especially if there are multiple items of the same with different subcodes, or sorry, different quantities. So going back to here, again, we get our reconciliation lines. So you can see it's going to be presented with right here, the top 2 lines, it's only going to pull in 2 weeks worth from the top lines, 2 weeks worth that are different weeks from the bottom line, so on and so forth. So if the conflicting CQs are deleted, a reconciliation can be run. So if you run into this scenario and you're running a reconciliation and you're not getting the right numbers pulled in and you recognize that you have overlapping contractor quantities, if you contact the help desk, we can cancel the contractor quantities for you. We record whatever items are in there, reconcile the first one, then we can repost the second one and the third one and reconcile them in sequence as well. So kind of back it out and then do it in proper order rather than submitting it all at once and then trying to capture it all with one reconciliation. Again, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. It's so complex with hundreds of items and all this kind of complications and entanglement with our SOV and the different apps. So it's best to always just approach it from a clean standpoint. And that's the first thing we're always going to do. Our team is going to look at things and go, okay, how can we back things out and try and redo this step by step and just reapproach the issue that way. Then if we run into issues, we engage our KPMG vendor and so on and so forth and start to investigate further. But I'm trying to teach the users exactly the first thing we're going to look at when you come to us with an issue with contractor quantities, reconciliations, pay statements, invoices. These are the things we look at. So you can see here, this section, this is now going to be pulled into the reconciliation. Oh, go back. I missed my lines here. If you can just remember these lines. So if we back everything back out, run a reconciliation, it's going to capture these first 2 weeks there. It's going to knock the second one off. So I would probably do the reconciliation for the full date range, get that squared away, and then move on. So the contractor quantity cancellations, they're actually new. I think this is within the last month or so. Contractor quantities, pay statements, and reconciliations, we can now cancel after they're complete. Cancellation was always available to the users, but once you finish it, once you reconcile and acknowledge it and it's done, and then you find a mistake, we now have the ability to back that out. But because of the complications with the payment process that I'm talking about today, it also has to be done very carefully. So we have to back the invoice, then the reconciliation, then the individual contractor quantities and pay statements. So for now, contact our help desk and we'll assist you with that. Okay, back to the mechanics of contractor quantities. When you're inserting lines, you don't have to click insert a million times. You can actually type a number into that little insert field and insert as many as you want. So right here, you can input 10 there if you want. Click insert, it'll input 10 lines. So that's useful, especially when you're doing a big payment. So here, once the lines are added, you can start adding your items and subcodes. This is another newer piece. It's maybe between 2 and 3 months old, 3 and 4 months, maybe even. Lump sum change orders are posted for in here in the main contractor quantities grid and the main pay statement grid. So before they kind of stood alone up here in this change order drop down, this is going to go away very soon. They're all going to be here, and then you can progressively post against them between 0.01 and 0.99 units, or just post for the whole thing. And typically the lump sum change orders are appended to the end of the items list. So just scroll all the way down to the bottom and you should find them there, at least the newly created ones. Okay, so you input the quantities for each line with any comments. Comments are always helpful to the CA for sure, especially if it's a questionable quantity or maybe they weren't aware of it or wasn't sure when you installed it or not. Lump sum change orders are posted this way too, which is what I just touched on. Once invoiced, the invoice reference will actually backfill the system over here on the right. So you'll see a little link saying what the invoice was when it's billed, and then the quantity total to date shows how much has been progressed for that item so far. So you've got your revised subcode quantity, remaining subcode, payment quantity. You got all the good stuff in here. Here's the date of work section that I'm talking about as well. This is where you can backdate or otherwise appropriately date each item as you're submitting the contractor quantity. Oh, there's a lump sum change order there. So once a contractor quantity is submitted, is in submitted status and in ready for reconciliation stage, it's eligible for reconciliation. Quick thing on stages and statuses. Stage is much more brief. It's typically either draft, submitted, open, or closed, and it's more of a system thing. And then within there, we have all the statuses, which are more like labels. So you have reconciled, in reconciliation, submitted, in review, acknowledged, whatever it is, tells you more about the workflow steps and what specific step it is versus this is either, it's kind of like saying it's either in draft, it's in flight, or it's done. In reconciliation means it has been aggregated into a reconciliation. So if I submitted a contractor quantity, the CA ran a reconciliation and it's pulled those items into it, it's now kind of sequestered into, for this example, CQ11. So those items are kind of linked to that reconciliation until that reconciliation is canceled or dumped, and then the items would fall back and be eligible for reconciliation again, or they get reconciled, acknowledged, and then pulled into a payment, at which point the in reconciliation status would change to reconciled. So is there any questions on contractor quantities? So this isn't a payment question, but the CMS is not allowing me to do a PQP change under a change order. This question for the end of this session, well, it's going to be the first one, right? So remove any item that is a lump. So if it's a lump sum change order, only a lump sum change order will cancel it. It doesn't create an item with a quantity necessarily because lump sum items don't have quantities. So if you want to remove it, whatever, delete it, cancel it. As per the change order manual, it's another negating change order. The slide deck will be available after this training, as well as the recording session, Ingrid. Oh, thanks, James. MTO CMS help desk response time is 15 days, which is too late. That's a very singular date, but we try. Okay. Do a quick demo here. So this is in the same production environment that you're all using for your contracts every day. It's just in kind of a separate partition, away from everything that we use for testing and all that good stuff. So I'm just going to fire up a contractor quantity here. I'll click new. Down here, not going over any of the general functionality stuff, but we can expand this. Here I've got my from to dates. So as always, I can backdate something. I can leave it for this week. I can't go into the future. So if I try and submit here, it's going to say end period cannot be future date. So we'll just make it for the 12th. Insert here, so I can insert one line here, or I can insert 4 lines, totaling 5, whatever I want to do. Just going to choose some random items here, do a change order too. See, I have some down here. Ignore the odd names, it's just me testing. And then you can also delete too. So if you add too many lines, I'll just highlight here, delete these. Subcode. So I think this has been touched on a lot, but migrated contracts only have one subcode due to the data structure that came over from WBCMS, but new contracts have all the subcode availability there. And if this were a pay statement and the CA or the contractor wants to convey the subcode for the item and they can only pick one, they can just come over to the comments and say subcode 5, Q sheet, location 60, whatever it is. And then of course the quantity 2, and then my lump sum change order, I'll do 25%. So I can save this, it'll save and draft. You can see there's a couple other draft items here. Maybe I'm not done yet. I haven't confirmed quantities yet. I haven't received a summary from the pit, whatever it is. But I'm going to go ahead and post these 3. And just for fun, I'm going to backdate one of them back to last week. Okay, so that's submitted, ready for reconciliation status. A couple questions here. During a recent quantity reconciliation, the site inspector inadvertently entered the same pay statement twice on 2 dates. Contractor entered it once correctly. However, the system wanted to automatically reconcile the inspector quantity without allowing me to enter. It does allow you, Bob. You just click edit at the top of the reconciliation, then you go in and overwrite whatever the final whatever the actual number is. So in your case, you would have just clicked edit, put a 1 in where the 2 is, but the system does autofill the reconciled amounts with the inspector's numbers, assuming that those are correct because the inspector's numbers have already gone through review by the CA at the diary level before reconciliation. Will there be a failsafe developed to prevent underpayment if CA and contractor dates don't align? I believe the underpayment was avoided by pulling IPs from last invoice date. So that is, the failsafe is that we have alleviated that restriction on the from date. So where you couldn't adjust the from date, your from date was always linked to 1 day after the previous 2 date. You can now adjust those dates appropriately. So if it's not capturing something, you just stretch the date back further, adjust the date of the contractor quantity, whatever it is. WBCMS had a function to be able to Excel export. How come this is not? So it's not in CMS yet. It doesn't, well, we don't export out of the SOV, but the export is available as far as subcodes and items when you win the contract. So you get the items and subcode sheet, but everything else is contained within the system. So it's very much aiming to be a digital platform where the quantities and everything are managed within the system. Can the contractor post a quantity more than subcode but less than tender quantity? Yes. Can you do a negative quantity? No. The only way to adjust the quantity of any item in the world is a change order or an OPA. Negative postings won't do anything. Does the contractor and CA quantities have to match exactly by date? No. It's only the date ranges that have to pull in. The individual dates of date of work themselves don't have to match. Yeah, that's the only restriction is the date ranges. So for Eric, I'm not aware of a decimal limitation for postings and pay statements or contractor quantities. There's a limitation that's being fixed right now. It might already be fixed actually. The daily work record hourly rates for equipment. There was a mistake there that was only allowing integers and not decimal places. If you send in an example to this help desk, Erica, we can take a look at that. But no, I'm working in production, so I'm working with the same environment that everyone here is working with. I know there's one hand up too. Oh, Erica, that's you. Do you want to follow up, or do you want to? Is there more to that?
No, I'm fine. Yeah, we've tried. We can only do 0.3 or 0.2.
Is it?
Is
that?
Yeah.
Well, check the remaining item or the remaining quantity, but yeah, send it in and we can take a look at it.
We're prorating. It's okay. How do I don't know how to lower my hand here.
Oh, can I do it for you? Yeah, I can do it for you.
Okay,
there you go. I got you covered. All righty. Good questions. Let's keep it moving here. So pay statements. Excuse me. Pay statements operate much like the contractor quantities do, except that CQs are considered eligible for reconciliation based on manually inputted date ranges, where the pay statements are actually subject to the date the diaries are reviewed by the CA. So when the diary is complete, it's either the CA does it themselves and the system recognizes they're the CA and automatically approves it, or the inspectors input pay statement quantities into their diaries. It goes to the CA for review. The CA reviews it, and then once they click review, then it's eligible for inclusion in the reconciliation. Pay statement items may be backdated via manual input, but this date serves only as a record of installation. It doesn't affect its inclusion in a reconciliation, which I think we've covered well. So in that sense, CQ and pay statement are the same. Pay statement quantities are not eligible for reconciliation until the CA has reviewed the diaries within which the statements are made. Note the pay statement below contains two payments against the same item and subcode. However, they have different dates of work. So you'll recognize this little exercise from contractor quantities, but I just want to make sure it's clear that the dates of work are very important to the ministry, particularly the CA's dates of work, but they don't govern inclusion to the reconciliation. The tender item selection as well. So at the top of the diary, you can link your diary to either a tender item, a change order, or a compensation request. This links in no way to function or business at all. You don't have to link the item in order to pay an item. The only business it really references and reflects is inspectors who are inspecting daily work record work or time and material work or compensation request work are to keep a separate diary in relation to it. So this is basically an interpretation of that to say, okay, now we're looking at this change order 9. Where is it? I can just filter all my entire diary list by change orders and quickly find it, or filter by compensation requests. And obviously this is great for the claims folks and the audit folks too, which is where this request came from. So the reconciliation dates, again, they exclude the item of work, the one specific item of work, but even though the date of work is outside the reconciliation date range, the date of the diary itself is within it. Therefore, the quantity is included. So you can see there's the 10 from our previous pay statement. So these date differences are important to the ministry. I know it seems maybe a little odd to say, well, okay, I have the date that the diary was completed and a separate date. And why do we need two dates, and why can't I control the date of the installation, and blah, blah, blah. So you can control the date of installation, but the date the diary was completed is also important to the ministry. You have to remember that we are managing typically 2 service providers in the delivery of a typical construction project. So it's important to us to know the date the contractor installed the work, and it's important for us to also know the day the CA actually reported to us that the work was installed. Those gaps would obviously relate to the performance of the CA themselves in the administration of that construction contract. So that's why those 2 dates are there. The reason that the reconciliation is controlled by the date of the diary itself is because obviously the configuration didn't contemplate the slowed migration experience that we all had and kind of suffered through. So excluding backdated payments we're trying to catch up, it's configured to work as you're going through a project. So you go through a project, you finish a day, you finish a diary, it's done. The next day, 2 days later, whatever, the CA looks at your diary, checks the quantity, yep, it's good to go, reviews it, and then doesn't have to think about it again. So it's kind of designed to work based on you capturing dates when you're supposed to be capturing dates and diaries and stuff in your diary. It's kind of the same as the daily work record, where in WBCMS we used to have this whole reconciliation process, and CAs had to do daily work records and contractors had to do them. Well, we've returned that to the business as well. So only contractors do daily work records. It comes into the inspector. The inspector disposes whatever their quantum is, and then it goes directly to the CA. They do the same thing, and then once that's done, those are the numbers that get pulled into the TMSP. So it's very much designed to, you do it as it comes, you realize it, you finish it that day, you don't ever have to think about it again. It pops up in the TMSP, you see it later, you go, yep, it all checks out, and you move on. Understand this is just happy path assumptions, and there's always a million complications, but that's kind of the design principle for it. So when an inspector makes a pay statement in their diary, the system recognizes this inspector and automatically sends it to the CA. The CA has to review it then. The quantities within the pay statement are not eligible for inclusion in the reconciliation until reviewed by the CA. So it's important to note, it's like leaving a contractor quantity in draft until you submit it. It's not going to tell the system you want that quantity to be rolled up yet. And then as you saw, same as a contractor quantity, the status goes to ready for reconciliation. Is there any questions on that? Okay, so if contractor quantity is 10, oh, is there a question?
Sorry, no, I was just jumping in to prompt you to check the chat, but it seems like you're on.
Oh, yeah, yes. I just realized 5 minutes ago my camera's not on. So where'd that go? Yeah, similar to the input for the contractor when inputting hours for daily work records, apparently they're unable. Yeah, so that we know about. The hourlies on a DWR are currently integers, but they should be fixed this week or very soon. Why the items not in order? I'm not sure what you're referring to, if there was a screenshot with them out of order. But either way, I would say I don't know why. Oh, these is because of the WBCMS data too, how it's structured alphabetically. It looks at only the first column first, so it looks at 00111, then 46011. So it's messed up, but it does not prevail for newly integrated contracts. It's only old contracts using WBCMS data. What if you reconcile a payment quantity and the next month the item is finalized and the item was overpaid in error on the previous payment. How do we adjust the tender item quantity and payment? So yeah, that is after several checks and balances have failed to catch the overpayment. And at that point, there is no way to back out the invoice. Like the check's gone through the mail and PPS, the invoice is there, the number's there. At that point, it's an OPA. You can't do a change order. You can't reduce the quantity because the scope of the work for that item didn't change. It's just we paid them too early. So you do an OPA to reclaim whatever the amount of the overpayment is. And it's kind of like advance payment almost, but in reverse. And then when they actually install the work, you release the OPA, but you won't have a tender item to post because you've already posted it and negated it with the OPA. So you cancel the OPA, it releases the item that we now owe them later on once it's installed, and then you're on your way. If the contractor quantity is 10, the correct quantity is 12. Can CA input 12 for reconciliation quantity without contractor changing their quantity? Currently, they can. We're looking at putting a validation back on that. We left it open. I don't love it, leaving it open, but the contractor still acknowledges the reconciliation and has control over it then and can still submit other CQs. So ideally, I'd tell you, push it back, or if it's already done, just do another contractor quantity and reconcile that one. And don't clean it up in the reconciliation, but the configuration allows both options right now. Will any remaining unreconciled quantities carry forward to the next? No. So anything that's not reconciled is kind of dumped back to the main tender item quantity and has to be reposted. Hypothetically, if the contractor submits their CQ for the month of August on September 1st, but the CA doesn't complete their inspector diaries or pay statements until September 2nd, will the contractor quantities be captured in a reconciliation? Yes, it will. So the contractor quantities and the pay statements work independently of each other. And you've likely noticed you can reconcile an entire reconciliation with only contractor quantities in it. Remember, it's important to remember that the ministry is managing two contracts with this, right? It's important that we pay the contractor. The contractor submitting quantities through a contractor quantity app and then reconciling, acknowledging that, and invoicing is their payment process as outlined in the Act. We can't stop them from that. I'm going to be very concerned with my CA if I'm seeing invoices come into me with no pay statement quantities, no inspector quantities to compare to, because I'm going to say, what's going on, right? But that's a separate issue independent from the contractor and their quantities. So it allows it, and it's more so handled and managed by business through the CSAs. Darren, TMSP, I didn't mean to put an A on it. TMSP is time and material summary for payment. Yeah, when you look for items 22, it's next to 220. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, how it's structured in WBCMS. We're actually looking at, the vendors looking at, there's two different forms of search in the system. If you go to the diary and flip open a tender item, like if you want to link your diary to a tender item and then it gives you a tender items list, that list filters properly, weirdly. And it was one of the CAs on this call that brought that to our attention. And then down below, you'll choose an item and it's not filtered properly. So they're looking at that, but it's just on the myriad of list of things to do. To create an inspector diary, seems we can choose only one contact item for each record. Can we select multiple items in a diary? So yes, you can. You just have to do the multiple inserts. So why don't I do that now? So you sign in, add multiple lines. So it's one line per item. So flip over to my diary here, create a new one. We got to figure out a way to turn this stupid beeping off every time someone tries to join next time. I apologize. Yeah, so payment training. This is where I mean, if you choose a tender item and your item, that's going to take forever and make me look stupid, but here they all flow properly. Oh no, they don't. See, it makes me look stupid either way. So yeah, we're looking at how those sort, but just choose whatever item you want, diary category, do CA. Note if you do choose other, it's a mandatory comment as to what kind of type it is. So if your ATMS doesn't want to go in electrical, you could put it there. Down here, I won't cover the rest of the diary. That's covered in the CA training if you want. Actually, I'll show you how to access that in a second. So right here, so you're talking about you can only add one item here at a time and one subcode. But what you would do here is just add multiples. And then you can add as many as you want. I think that's what you're getting at, Hamid. When making CO, adjust item down, then send to contractor for DOA. The adjustment comes back 0. Then needs, so that's, yeah, that's change management. It's covered in our change management. Let me get through this demo. I'll show you where the case is. But that's, Mark, that's basically you issue, when you click create change order, it resets the numbers to 0. So when you send it to the contractor, they don't see your estimate. If the contractor doesn't put an estimate in themselves and send it back, it comes back to you blank. So the contractor is not inputting an estimate properly there for you to assess once it comes back in, but that's covered in the CA training. So Emily, Alexander, and Hamid, if you can confirm this answers your questions. He says, yeah, I just like how I can only select one item when doing a diary. Or you mean up here?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes, up there.
If it's up here,
Yeah,
you can,
there.
yeah, so just pick whatever the most relevant item is. It's just for your CA and CSA to be able to filter through and find stuff easier.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take that back though. I think it would be a pretty easy fix to add multiples, but it might just confuse things too. For tenor item, inspectors have been choosing the controlling operation. Yep, that's great. That's what I would recommend to the controlling operation. Okay. Yep. I think we're good there. So again, I'm not going to do these just for everyone here's sake. I'm sure everyone's been through this at least once. We'll even post something. Wonder what happens if I try and post against a no bid item. Apparently you break CMS if you post against a no bid item. We locked her up. In the meantime, up here, if you search the case app, open the case, right click, videos and documentation. You've got CA training, contractor, general functionality, and then the contractor and CA training that we ran again 3 or 4 months later. So by all means, check out that. And James on our team has very nicely chaptered everything here. So you can, there's equipment, labor, material, daily work records, time material summary for payment, change orders. So Mark, if you go right to 107 in the CA training, I think we start to cover it there. My ugly mug again. This one with the no bid items. Oops. That's funny. We'll see what happens here. Alrighty. Okay, lump sum change orders and OPAs. So OPAs, lump sum change orders, are included into an invoice in different ways. The lump sum COs are manually posted against and reconciled like we've seen, and then OPAs are just automatically pulled in based on their status and their date. They actually go around the reconciliation process too. So other CO types are not required to be reconciled in the CO. So time and materials are automatically included on the invoice when TMSPs are completed, and quantity adjustments, PQPs, only affect the quantity of the item on the tender items list, or the SOV, which is schedule of values itself. So you do the change order, affects the items, still requires the posting to tell the system that those items have been installed. If you think of posting as just installed, you only enter it then you're good. Here's a lump sum change order that's been completed. The price agreement's been signed, but there's one more important step before it's able to be posted against. And this is very important because it trips a lot of CAs up. All OPAs and lump sum COs have to be processed to transactions tab. So this is like putting them on the tender items list. It's telling the system, okay, this commercial item is done. This is the price, this is the value, these are the items. Boom, let it affect the SOV, and that basically takes the tender items, adjusts the quantities, adds new items, adds lump sum change order, whatever it is, and then tells the system, okay, this can now be invoiced. The system only looks to the transactions tab and the SOV for invoicing purposes. If you click the view source record in the top, so you do have to click this stupid little thing because it comes to you in a task in order to create the transaction, and then it posts it onto the transactions tab. Once it's there, it can be called up in pay statements and contractor quantities and posted against. So once it's in here, you're going to see it as a drop down in the pay statements and CQs that we've been showing already. You can see right there, there's a change order reference. It's got the change management reference and the SOV breakdown. So it'll take you directly to where it is on the SOV as well. If you click that link, the CO can be posted against, calling up against, or sorry, in the items drop down here, like we've seen right here. So I was speaking to this earlier. This is going to be removed. This is kind of speaking to our previous configuration for change orders, but we're going with the standard way now. Once lump sum CO is selected in the items drop down, you just post a quantity against it. There's 0.55. Include any comments, of course, and then pay statements work the same way for lump sums as, or sorry, pay statements work the same way as contractor quantities. Once submitted, the CO quantity is eligible for reconciliation. So just like any other item, you still have to agree on the amount for the change order and reconcile it and acknowledge it. So flipping to OPAs, they don't have input dates. They just have the value and then the activity code. So for this reason, adjustments need to be made when they're realized because it's going to be based on that created date right there. The index-based adjustments aren't known until the following month anyway. So index adjustments have always ensued the month they were incurred. And then any other things are just any other OPA adjustments have to be enacted within the same month if they're going to get onto the same invoice. If not, they're done the following month and they're captured on the following invoice. Contractor does not have access to OPAs. On the invoice with date September 7th to 8th, the OPA doesn't pull in. You can see right there, it's not pulling in. But then if we go to the same invoice adjusted to September 9th, right there, you can see it pulls in. I know these are screenshots. I could have pulled them from anywhere, but I'll show you in the demo. Scrolling to the OPA section of the invoice shows all the OPAs included. So when you generate an invoice and scroll down, whatever OPAs are listed there should be shown and calculating against the above. The fuel adjustment OPA is listed here as a hyperlink to take the user to the actual OPA. So you can see OPA 8 there. If I wanted to click it, it would pop the OPA open if I'm permissioned to it. There's currently an issue preventing the following OPA types from calculating. So the liquidated damages, head office overhead, sample referee, and adjudication. The adjudication is not really an issue. It's intentionally not working. We are finalizing our claims suite with the claims group right now. It's going to be fully functional, fully operational, including an ODEC aligned adjudication process. So once that's all flipped on, the adjudication OPA is actually kind of just going to be there in the back end and leveraged through the adjudication app that will have to be preceded by a CR and then a claim and then, or sorry, a CR and then adjudication, or CR claim then adjudication. So if you do require these OPAs in the interim, I just sent some off yesterday actually to try and finalize this development and this issue, certainly within the next couple months, if not by the end of the month. But if you require these OPAs, just work with your CSA to select an appropriate OPA type and keep in mind what section of the invoice they get pulled into. So section A and B would be the main differences there. C is really only set-offs and a couple other things. So just be aware, and then if you still have questions, you can always write into the help desk and we'll try and help you out. So I see some questions on the screen here. For tonnage items, the quantity reconciled with the contractor is based on the tickets entered. So it is, but the material weight ticket app is not directly linked into the pay statement. So the material weight ticket app stands to serve a collection, organization, and calculation of tonnage quantity for the inspector, which they then turn and transpose to their pay statements. So yes and no. The create transaction is not visible in the view records for CO. Yeah, you have to click view source record. I think I touched on that in one of the slides. So at the top, you click view source record and then it's there. Contractor does not have access to OPAs. It's always been an owner adjusted amount anyway. There's no workflow or interaction with the OPAs, and all OPAs that enact any sort of adjustments, calculations, penalties, or otherwise are to be issued by INC. So that should be the communicative mechanism there. What category under OPA would we use for NCR compensation? I'm not familiar with that question. Non-conformance. We don't, there's no penalties linked to non-conformances now, but I might be misunderstanding. At what point does a change order become visible as a tender item for the inspector to select when he's doing, so he can do a separate CO diary? So that is when the transactions, when it's on the transactions tab. As soon as you click transactions, whatever it is, yeah, process to transaction, and it's on there, it will be selectable and visible in drop downs. DWRs need to be associated with the CO or CR, correct? Yeah. So there's a way, so for situation where a CO has not been issued, but a DWR needs to be associated to either a CO or a CR, is there a way to create a CO without linking it to either? So you can create a change order, but you can't take daily work records. The whole the whole principle behind this configuration is a daily work record cannot exist under the general conditions without a compensation request or a change order in place. The compensation request doesn't have to be reviewed and reported and responded to. It just has to be submitted. So the contractor just submits it as soon as he fills out the top and puts a dollar figure to it and submits it. They can link daily work records to it, but one of those two must exist to take daily work records. So then the inspector can only do the separate CO diary for the final pay statement. So what point does a change order become visible? Yeah, so the inspector can only post against the change order once the change order has been completed. So if the work was done in good faith before the change order was completed, and then that bridged into a separate progress payment period, you might be in some difficulty because the contractor wants to get paid, but the CA can't necessarily post against the item. But I think you would look at stretching your dates out or something there to accommodate if that's the case. Can a new item be added to the contractor in a change order in CMS? Change order function does not allow for a new item. So you answered your own question. Mohammed, yeah, that's correct. There is an issue currently preventing it, but we expect also hopefully by the end of the month, if not the following month, for that to be fixed. All those requirements have been submitted to the vendor. They're just working on it. Who permits office personnel to view invoices and other payment apps for processing and preparation? Who permits office personnel? Your RFQ or RFP outlines the roles and the folks into which those roles are into the folks and the roles that they are occupying, and those roles and their permissions and responsibilities are governed by the CADE and the case and the contract. We have an issue on a migrate MTO project where we are unable to have already approved COs via paper method integrated. So yeah, you approved a change order on a piece of paper, but the system doesn't know that. So the change order will have to be replicated in the system. They were started in WBCMS, not completed. So therefore they didn't migrate it, and then they were completed by paper. The only person in the whole world who can update the system to be caught up with the paper administration done in parallel is the CA. Okay, let's do. Yeah, I think I'm misunderstanding you, Amari. If you want to shoot me an email after, we can look at it. Okay. How are we for time? Not bad. I'll do a really quick demo here of OPAs. I believe I have one queued up, so we don't have to go through the whole workflow of the change order. But just to show here, so here's payment training CO. I think I did this yesterday. DOA is approved, everything's done. Contractor signed off here. Payment training CO1, good to go. So there's one thing missing. I have to create transaction, and it's going to tell me you have to view source record. So I think this is what one person was asking about the transaction. So if you go to there, you just click view source record and then create transaction. It's just an annoying little bug where the button can't be clicked at the one stage. Here's all the information. You can see here's the line item, 20,000. Here we are on the transactions page. I click save here. There we go. If you see this unlock, you're good to go. Don't click that, definitely don't. But then if we come down here, what was this, change order 7? That's gonna take a while to load. I'm gonna go OPAs for the sake of time here. Uh-oh, we're slowing down. I don't know if anyone else has noticed performance issues. Our team was noticing them today in the browser. We're looking into it, but. So here's a previous fuel. See the invoice reference here because it's been invoiced already. So this is prevalent throughout any payment related items. Just going to create 2 of them here. Actually only 1 since they're based on dates. Do fuel again. In case folks haven't noticed here, the fuel, we've bolstered it a little bit. So instead of just doing a massive fuel adjustment, you do one for each specific item of the 23 items in the GCs that are subject to adjustment. And then you choose your fuel price index here as an activity code. We're going to automate this little portion soon here too. But the purpose is we want to know, okay, fine, we paid $5 trillion for fuel. Was it for asphalt? Was it for concrete? Was it for rock blasting? Was it for whatever it was? So just a little piece there. Description, payment training, save this. There we go. And then click approve. So now reset to draft. It's good to go. Created date 9/12/206. So we know that date is important for the invoice now. Okay, so we have a lump sum change order that was just created. Now that it's on, let's just run a quick test. Flip open a diary again. Just to show that CO7 should be here now. There it is right there. So as soon as I click that transactions button, you're good to go. Why do reconciliation different than what is entered in the diary with a payment in diary 240? However, only 43. I'd have to take a look at that one. Natalie, if you want to send it in. You said that an OPA is not office person responsibility to. So, if that's what the question on personnel is, only contract administrators are able to process an OPA. Okay, gonna move on. Reconciliation. Okay, so once the importance of dates between the CQs and pay statements are understood, the reconciliation becomes much easier. If you are aware of the rules surrounding inclusion in the reconciliation and you can plan the administrative process accordingly, it should become routine even, which I know is hard to plan sometimes on construction projects. If you recall the distinct differences in dates, so there's the date of work for the individual line item in the pay statement, the date of the diary was the date the diary was reviewed, the date range of the contractor quantities, the date of work of the individual line item within that contractor quantity, and then the date range of the reconciliation and the invoice. It's recommended to run reconciliations on a weekly basis when possible. So I know it's not always possible. Perfect world is blah, 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 but it's always easier to reconcile more often. There's obviously too many reconciliations when you're doing it every day, but the be all end all is if you do it at the end of the month, you've got 20 some odd days of work to reconcile. If you do it at the end of each week, you've got 5 days. And then even when you get to the final week of the month, you still only have 5 days to worry about. So just food for thought, but that is a recommendation that kind of spurred the GC 100S19 and then later the assistance to the contract administrator clause in the general conditions. So here again is that reconciliation. You can see the date of work and the payment quantity, reconciliation, blah, blah, blah. We saw this already this morning just to show and kind of hammer the point home that it's the date ranges that are important. And as long as those date ranges are within or match the contractor quantity records, they're going to pull in. And as long as the diary dates of review are within those date ranges, they will also pull in. So the pay statement with the backdated quantity in it, you see here, we've got 7 and 3, and then one was posted on September 1st and one the following week. Reconciliation date ranges, we've been through this before. So even though the date of work is outside, the date of the diary itself is within it. So you can see the diary record or quantity is included there. The reconciliation process is designed to be done regularly, and due to the restrictions with dates that are backed in or baked into its configuration, retroactive payments don't function as well. So I do recognize that this sucks for the migrated contracts that are trying to catch up payments and whatnot, but for those purposes, obviously alleviating the requirements around dates and all that to match, having catch-up invoices to capture multiple invoices that were done outside the system, uploading all your corroborating information for that payment or those payments. We've got the catch-up payment guideline that I can send out, but I believe it's available on technical publications, and it's been sent out a couple times via the MMEB. It's just a quick guide to help you catch up payments if that's the case you're in. But nonetheless, the delayed migration period was not anticipated, and therefore we didn't configure for it. So the system's configured to align with the day-to-day administrative practices of the field team on any construction project. So the system captures the dates of CQ pay statement completion. So if a user is trying to catch a payment up from 2 months ago by making a CQ pay statement today, it won't pull in properly if the reconciliation and invoice dates are reflecting those past dates. So in these cases, backdate the invoice and record a note on the invoice or attach a memo stating that's a catch-up payment from the past and actually represents the whatever it is. If you recall the slide illustrating the date range alignment here, we have the date ranges, then our little handy dandy reconciliation marks. Just keep in mind, this is kind of a visual representation of how the system works. It's not going to look and go, oh, well, yeah, but I mean, they probably want the 16th to the 27th pulled in too, right? It's only going to look at exactly what the dates you input. So for the same reason, you don't necessarily have to align the contractor quantity dates with the reconciliation. It should be the other way around. The contractor quantity dates should represent the actual date of work for the period and then the dates of work within it. Specifically date those line items. And then the reconciliation should be the thing that's working to encompass the contractor quantity, because the contractor quantity represents the dates. Like, that's the most important thing. When did you install the work, and when are you billing us for this installation? Again, keep in mind the multiple overlapping one. You can have multiple overlapping contractor quantities, but it's always best to do it one at a time. So reconcile the bottom line, then post and reconcile the second line, then post and reconcile the top. Otherwise, the system has no clue which ones you want it to look at, especially if maybe one of those lines is ready for reconciliation, one's not, one's pending acknowledgement, and then you run an invoice and the system goes, what the heck? The reconciliation, oh yeah, this was a duplicate that I forgot to delete. Sorry about that. Negative reconciliations and postings do not work. I think that was a question earlier. If there's an overpayment made or a correction to the tender item quantities required, it can only be done via change order or OPA. So a negative posting will not reduce or correct a quantity. If a quantity needs to be reduced, it can only be done so via CO or OPA. If an overpayment's been made, work with your CSA on how to correct it, because you can't reduce the quantity unless the scope's been decreased, and you may have paid an item before it was due, but the item will still need to be paid when it's installed. So that's what I was kind of rambling about before. If you overpay an item, you can't really adjust quantities to correct it because they will eventually be owed that, but you can't pay them now for it. So you have to take the payment back, and you can't take the quantity posting back, and then you reverse it. You give them the payment and you don't have a quantity posting when they actually install it in the future. And we'll do a demo. I don't know why that's. Okay, so we've got a couple items here ready for reconciliation. One's on the 9th, one's on the 12th. We have traffic control for 50%. And then we have a few here. Oh yeah, the no bid item. Just gonna screen that. You recall we have an OPA processed on the 12th as well. And change order 7, I believe we didn't post for. So I'm going to run a reconciliation. So if I just do this week, myself in there, save, see what it pulls up. So here we have change order 6 that we posted against. For the traffic control, that was 25%. I think someone asked a question about that. Yeah, I don't see any traffic control because traffic control is posted on the 9th. So if I go edit, what did I do? Oh yeah, sorry. Back to the 9th, save this again. Did I add it or no? Diary. Oops, someone had a question up. Might as well answer a question while oh, sorry, it wasn't a traffic control item, it was change order 6. Okay, we're good to go then. So now we have change order 6 there. We have got the super pave. Wonder what that's gonna look like on the invoice. This was a new item. So, and then it looks like we've got rock flow check dams from another one. So here's a reconciliation. If I cancel this, it's going to expel all these from the reconciliation. They'll roll back. If you look now, the diary will say in reconciliation. See here, before they said ready for it. But if I were to cancel this reconciliation, these would tumble back to being ready for reconciliation again. For the sake of time, I'm just going to submit these. It goes to the contractor. So now I'm the contractor here. I have either save or acknowledge. Basically, the only thing you can do here is acknowledge or unacknowledge. Typically, I guess you would always acknowledge these. Unacknowledging it is going to not pull it into the invoice. So if I was like, oh, well, no bid to be tendered, don't pull that in, I would undo that. Realistically, there's probably few scenarios I can think of, but dispute resolution always comes to mind. So maybe you have a compensation request submitted about the price of this work because the condition of the site once you showed up between bidding and start of work was just, wow, now it's underwater and you can't complete it for the same number. So you're arguing about the price of the item altogether. You might say, no, I don't want to get paid for this, or you might take it, get the undisputed amount. But regardless, this speaks to the notice of non-payment from the act. So this is basically the ministry saying, here's the items, here's the quantities that we have, acknowledge it or unacknowledge it, but this is your notice of what quantities are going to be accepted on the invoice. And then you go from there. Just looking at the questions here. So I keep saying that I can't reduce an item quantity via CO, or I cannot reduce item quantity only via CO OPA, but you do not demonstrate how. I don't demonstrate how because it's not ever been business practice to just submit an invoice with a negative quantity. It's always been change order OPA. I don't know what else to tell you. It's the only way that you can adjust the quantities in the system and in MTO general conditions. Ray?
Yes, I'm trying to create a change order to cancel a lump sum item. I keep placing -1 and it keep reverting back to 1. I'm trying, the item was removed from the contract and it's a lump sum. And I create a change order to do so, and it does not allow me so. So every time I switch it to -1 to get a 0 quantity, it came back to 1. Thank you.
Okay, send that in then and we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Can we cancel the reconciliation and create another one? So yes and no. So you can cancel a reconciliation. I don't think I have one open now. If I choose a period, it's not gonna pick up any quantities. So right here, if I click cancel here, it's still within the CA's control to cancel this, because this is your first opportunity to even see what's being rolled up here. So it could be completely crazy and you want to throw it out and okay, I need to go back and do more diaries or whatever it is. But once you submit this and it goes to the contractor and they acknowledge it, then you need the help desk to cancel it. But if you write in, we can cancel it, and then we can cancel the contractor quantities and the pay statements too. Might as well do the question now. Curtis, is there any known bugs, issues with user to see history button? I don't know. So there's no issues. I don't know how you even saw a history button a few months ago. We are looking at getting it configured for a wider audience, like mostly the internal MTO folks, but out of the box, it was not configured that way. So it's another thing on the list, but no bug or issue. It's just another thing to get to. Can CA change quantities? Yes, through OPA change order or in the reconciliation or in their diary. When will the view file for the reconciliation section be fixed so it shows the non-integer values? I'm not aware that it's not. I'm looking right now at a non-integer value for a change order, Keith. So if you're not able to display anything but an integer, that's odd. But
Ryan, what I mean is you go up to the top and click view on a reconciliation that you've had finished. Those are non-integer, even if there's some of them have been sorry, they only show integers, not the non-integers.
Especially with over like what 400.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't even aware of that. If someone on the team can take a note, that's just a quick adjustment into the portable file rendering. Thanks, Keith. I think that's it. All right, keep it moving here. One portion left, and then we can do a few more questions, but I think we're doing pretty good for time. And if you're noticing it's getting a little repetitive, I guess that's good, because it is kind of repetitive. I do repeat myself a lot because it's a process that builds upon itself. So most of the invoice work is already accomplished through the contractor quantities, pay statements, and reconciliation. Well, I would say 99.9% of it. Once the reconciliations are complete, a contractor simply needs to know which reconciliations to include and what their dates are. So the invoice date range is simply going to capture the from and to dates within its own range, and all reconciled items and COs and all approved OPAs will pull in. Once a person in the service provider contact spot can submit only, not once. So this is very important. Only the person in the service provider contact spot down here can submit invoices for either the contractor or the CA. So the example shows MTO for all slots, but typically it would be our service provider there. Again, this is my testing contract. So it's my name there, but that should be the CA if this was a CA contract, or it should be the contractor if it's the contractors. And while the contractor has 3 roles, all of which can be the external contractor PM role, only the person in this slot can submit the invoice. The Kahua platform is very careful with payments and invoices, and it controls it in this way that you must designate one signator to generate and submit the payment, no matter who you are, what contract you are. So that prevails on the CA agreements, where only the external CA PM can submit an invoice, and their name has to be here as well, even if they're already in the roster role. So contract services, definitely keep that in mind. I know that they know that, but more so for our external parties, if that's blank on the invoice, that could be the reason for an issue you're having with invoices. So that person, whoever's in that service provider contact, clicks new. The user fills out the date ranges, considering the dates of all the reconciliations that they want to capture, and then the distribution list. So distribution list, for those who don't know, is like carbon copying someone. It doesn't send something to them. There's no action for them to take, but it's letting them know, hey, FYI, I just submitted this. We've hit it on some records, but mostly it's there for all records. It's helpful, just a little FYI. So down here, that's the service provider contact that automatically pulls in from the contract spot. So if you fire up an invoice and notice that's blank, you should get your CSA or your contract services person, if you know who they are, who set up your contract, get them to add that person. They should be automatically added either during the setup or during the migration, but we found many of them did not migrate with the contact properly, or they're not integrating through properly. So just make sure that that's filled out. Please do not record or edit the record IDs. It's understood that users want to match whatever sequencing you had in WBCMS, but when you do this, it changes the name record association to the actual record ID in the system. So it's kind of skewing records, so to speak. If I remove the permission to edit this, I remove the permission to allow contractors to create a new invoice. And if I hide this field, it hides the fields in both the actual record and the log view, so then you can't tell the invoices apart from each other. So while we try and workshop and button this up, please don't change those. It just makes things more difficult for everybody, especially if you start having issues with multiple in-flight invoices and stuff like that. So if the contractor has altered the titles of their invoices but are in contest of an invoice, it makes deciphering the sequence and unique invoices very difficult. CA invoices are different but simpler. Users simply input the monetary or hourly quantities depending on the contract type and submit. So change orders also appear on the CA invoices and you can post against them. They just become another line item as far as what's presented to you for lines to post against in the invoice. So 2 change orders below against the CA contract, you can see there. One's for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock. One's for 6, 5, 4, 6, 3, 2, 1 o'clock. You can see here, once the quantities are posted against them, the remaining figures automatically update. So you can see I've posted against the quantities, the main engineering item, and then the change order as well. So you can see here, this is the main item. One, it was a $10 million CA job. I'm taking 100,000, or I paid 100,000 previously for a total of 11% of the total. Down here you have change orders. You can see transaction 1 and 2 and their values. So here's 1546321, and then I've posted out here. So here I've just input. I've just inputted 5 million for this one and 100,000 for this one. Because remember, this was 654321. Took 5 million out of it. Now it's only 1546321. I only took 100,000 out of this one. There should only ever be one in-flight invoice at a time. So if I could hammer anything home, it would be this for this training. It's very important. Overlapping reconciliations, contractor quantities, fine. That's easy. Sometimes the system knows, sometimes it doesn't. Overlapping invoices with multiple reconciliations on the go are always going to be a problem. So if the previous invoice is not in process status, a new invoice generation may cause issues with the items and workflow. So the Construction Act requires the ability for a contractor to submit an invoice at any time. Like it doesn't say we can restrict the submission of an invoice for review because our own internal administrative process has not managed to reconcile the invoice and pay it within the 28 days. So that's why we allow multiple open invoices. But it's still, from a system perspective, it's very bad. So we have to allow it based on the legislation, but we highly recommend against it because it can cause issues. So that's first and foremost. The majority of all invoice issues we've encountered is due to multiple flight invoices and them entangling multiples, reconciliations and items and everything else. So whenever possible, please strive to have the first invoice processed before generating and submitting the next one. Consider the interdependency of invoices here. So the previous amounts of one invoice are going to rely on the output of the previous invoices this period amount. So invoice 1 is submitted to contract services, but is not yet processed. Invoice 2 is submitted to the CA, but not yet processed. And invoice 3 is generated and the contractor finds that the previous amounts totals are not correct. This is because the calculations and resulting outputs of invoice 1 and 2 are not yet complete. So invoice 3 doesn't have a base figure to go on. If you recall, the consent to sublets in WBCMS were the same way. We've managed to fix it for consent to sublets in CMS, but it's almost impossible on invoices. So if this is a CA invoice, then the totals matter that much more, as there aren't several items and subcodes to break the amounts down into. There's only that one total. So multiple invoices are created without them being brought to process status in a sequential order. It will draw from the original contract amount rather than the reduced amount that's drawn when invoices are processed sequentially. Service providers, both CAs and contractors, are permissioned to delete their own invoices. They have to be in draft status. So if you need a correction, have it sent back to you and then you can delete it. The invoices must be deleted in reverse descending chronological order from the newest to the oldest. So if you've got 5 open, you can't delete 4, then 2, then 5, then 3, then 1. It's got to be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A recent upgrade allows the cancellation of reconciliations and contractor quantities or pay statements by the MTO CMS team. So if you've reconciled amounts that must be undone, please contact the team for support. So back to the overpayment issues, as long as it's caught in reconciliation and caught even up to right before the invoice is processed. If it's caught anywhere up to then, we can back it out and fix it. It just has to be caught before it's processed and paid through PPS. For information on catching up invoices that were processed outside of the system during the shutdown period migration, please refer to the administration catch up in CMS PDF previously issued via Monday morning email blast updates. I think it's on there now. If not, I'll send it out to this group right now. But that is all I have. I see some questions. Default cover page on some projects is pulling in. Yeah, I noticed that. It's actually, so our standard DBB payment certificate is PHCC 881B, and then the design builds are 881C. It's actually the right PHCC form that's configured and calculating on the invoice, but it's just that wrong label. So I've been meaning to submit a ticket forever to clean that up. On invoice screen, on the payment summary, some of my CA contract invoice payment summaries are only including the HST amount, but not the value of the invoice. I'm not sure, Kim. I'd have to look at that one specifically if you want to send it in to us. Could you please confirm if there is a way to add new subcodes to existing contract item? No, not at this time. There's not. Oh, I suppose I should do a quick invoice demo and then I'll send out the quiz. So I have one in draft here. So we have 9.9. See, I like to use this 1, 2, 3, 4 for OPAs. That's a dandy change order right there. Here's 1,500 for fuel. Let's go look at OPAs. So OPA fuel right here, and then this is a new one that was just done. So if I go back, You'll notice this invoice has listed OPA 8. This was in the slides too, 1,500. But if I extend the dates of this invoice, this is the annoying part, invoices take a minute to generate. Anything to do with the SOVs is complex and it takes a minute. If I refresh up to today's date, and then one more generate. In the meantime, I'll get this. Man, maybe it's just my whole computer phoning it in today. Recently, a CA invoice was under recommended status, but CA still could edit. Is this following the right workflow? I saw your email about that, Jennifer. I wanted to look at it more, but I haven't had a chance to. Is there a way to view and print all items in an invoice instead of the invoice summary? Yeah, I'll show you here. So let's see. There, and you have OPA 9 on. Once I adjusted the dates of the invoice, pulls in the 1, 2, 3, 4 for payment training. So the items from right here, if you click show all, this is basically your review of it. You've got amounts here. So anything with an amount or a quantity here is going to be billed. And then anything that you want to look into, you can click this open and it gives you the complete history of the item. So what's been previously paid, what's remaining on the item, retainage, summary. So if there's any changes to this item, everything would be accounted for here. If there's billings against this, so it would show you the progress down, the quantity adjustment, the current value, so current payment due, all that good stuff. So this is kind of the detailed breakdown of the invoice, but we don't have a printable version. It's by and large for a couple of reasons, but largely that invoices are very sensitive. They contain proprietary confidential information, and them being in the system is how they're submitted, approved, and paid. So them leaving the system serves no mechanical function and would only open up avenues of risk. If there is an overpayment that a service provider wants pulled back to be corrected, it may be processed in PPS but not yet show in CMS. These corrections should not be made without confirming the payment has not actually been actioned. Yes, I agree. Create a lump sum change order for damaged cable guide rail due to an accident, but by mistake associated with an activity code for the tender item, which was already paid 100% last year. CO did not go through, but it corrected the item price and shows 100% paid and not getting. Yeah, that one looks like it needs a closer look at, Ishak, if you want to send that in. Luigi's question was answered with the same question about the printing. So the invoice, once it was processed, we could export a cover sheet with line by line items. We're not able to do that now. So not currently in CMS, no. We're still looking at it, but currently it's not possible, largely because we are beholden to the AODA compliance, which is another piece of legislation relating to the system in general. Anything that comes out of the system must be size 12 Arial font with certain headings and certain Adobe tags for screen readers and this whole other world of of complicated stuff. So the invoice can't be exported in any useful function and meet those parameters right now. So it's living in the system along with everything else. We've successfully made the last payment for the contract and are now in the process of reconciling all project items to accurately reflect the work completed, aiming to reach 100% completion. We traditionally achieve this through the use of negative CO, OPA entries, and WBCMS. Will CMS permit us to carry out this process without impacting the final? No, you can't do a negative quantity change order or OPA without affecting final contract value. Unless the unit prices for all the items are 0. Some change orders, the contractor have access to the CA internal estimate. Contractor sent me a screenshot with, send a screenshot in. We get lots of these, but I've yet to see a screenshot yet where it was actually there was one report that was allowing function or access, and we just removed the whole report. So I have CQs that have not been reviewed, accepted by the CA. Does this mean that I'm only being paid based on CAs? No, this contractor quantities are not subject to review or approval by the CA. The review and the approval by the CA is the reconciliation. They're not allowed to dispose upon your submission of quantities what their opinion of quantities are. It's very much your record. Can we enter the invoice outside CMS into CMS later? Yeah, it's if you completed the payment outside, you can complete it inside. Just make sure you've got all the tender items and OPAs and change orders on there. And make sure your dates are correct. Okay, well, dare I say I'm on time for my 15 minutes for the quiz. So I just posted that in the chat for this meeting. You're all welcome to take it. Like I said, it's just for your own testing of your own knowledge. It should give you the answers right away. And then there's 5 questions at the end based on this training itself. So say what you feel. I can stay on for a few minutes, but that's all there is for this. I'll stay on and make sure there's no other questions. Numo? Perduno, sorry. You can ask your question if your hand's up there. You're still muted though. Oh, hands down.